Well, I tell you, we are really excited to have this fellow on because the last year or so, he has exploded on the scene with Fox 19 television. And he's also worked at other TV stations around the country, and he just absolutely knocks it out of the park on pro-Second Amendment stuff, on covering how Ron Paul and the Liberty Movement were shafted by the Republican establishment. He got an interview with President Obama last week that we're going to play a clip of later, where he really nails him down on the NDAA and secret arrest of American citizens. But by the way, a federal court 2 days ago did a permanent injunction. Of course, we had Chris Hedges on, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who was part of that suit. Now Obama is appealing to the Supreme Court. He also has looked at some of the anomalies of the shootings there in Colorado. So basically, he's like a professional, focused, kind of new-style Alex Jones, which I love. We need more people that have courage. And I think this guy's going places, let me tell you, because he's got it all. And it is so exciting to see reporters like this. Now, I'll say this. I remember Bill O'Reilly on Fox Television 13 years ago interviewing people like Tony Brown about the Illuminati and the New World Order. And I saw him on Extra, was it Hard Copy, 20-something years ago. We have the tape, we played it, exposing how the government and E. Howard Hunt basically killed JFK. So I hope that Ben Swann, if he ends up on national television, doesn't turn over to the dark side like Bill O'Reilly. But I got to tell you, it's just great to have him on, and I know there's other people out there. In fact, if you're a radio listener, if you could see him, we bring him up on Skype, you know who I'm talking about. But in a few minutes, we'll play some clips, and you'll know who we're talking about. But Ben, it is great to have you on with us here today.
Alex, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So tell us about your awakening. I mean, how they allow you in mainstream television to tell the truth.
You know, a lot of people are asking that question and how we get to cover the things that we do. And I'm really blessed. I work at a TV station that is not owned by Fox. We're a Fox affiliate. And because of that, a lot of people assume that we're owned by Fox. We're not. We're owned by Raycom Media. And I work for guys who are just interested in getting out factual information. And so we've had a tremendous response. I think the response that we've gotten from people has been just beyond expectation, far above and beyond expectation. And people are really hungry for it. They're hungry for someone who will look beyond, the typical mainstream narrative. And obviously, I mean, this is no surprise to you because clearly, the issue with alternative media is it is growing so fast right now. Versus what's happening with national media or mainstream media, which is essentially dying right now. And there's a reason for that. I mean, people have already heard all these same types of narratives before, and they're tired of them, and they're moving beyond them. And so we're fortunate to be kind of the bridge, I think, between alternative media and mainstream media.
By the way, I should add, they give you leeway because you have won both the Edward R. Murrow Award and 2 Emmys that you got, I guess, reporting from Texas. So I mean, you are quite the journalist, and so you're actually really doing real research. It's amazing. And again, mainstream media would still be dominant if people like you were on the national scene. How long have you been there in Cincinnati?
For about a year and a half, just a little over a year and a half. And about 2 to 3 months after I came to this station, we had this idea that we were going to try something different because it was time to kind of rebrand ourselves a little bit. And we moved towards a balanced news brand, which, again, sounds very much like the Fox brand. And so there are advantages to that, but then there are some disadvantages because there are some people who go into it automatically thinking, well, you're just, little mini Fox News. And part of the goal of that balanced brand was to do this segment called Reality Check, where we look beyond headlines and actually hold politicians accountable. I'm not sure my bosses realized how accountable we were going to hold them, but so far they've been extremely supportive of it, and we're doing our best to get out there and get to the facts.
How did you get the Obama interview? And then give us some of the behind the scenes. We're going to play a clip of it in a moment. But I mean, pretty amazing. Out of a sea of journalists and so-called mainstream media, no one will ever ask him a hard question. We know now for the first time ever, they're vetting the questions beforehand. They're in the press briefing room. And also when Obama goes out and gives official press conferences, you obviously got off script there and actually did your job.
Well, with the Obama interview, and it's pretty simple. I mean, he's been very good about doing these interviews with local media everywhere he goes. And it's actually a very good strategy because what you wind up having are reporters who will go out and ask a number of questions. Typically, they're locally focused. So in the case of Ohio, they'll ask about the auto industry. They're going to ask about jobs in Ohio, the economy, which is actually doing better than in a lot of places in the nation. And so it's really a good place for him to do those interviews. But he does them everywhere. And we were just next on the list. And as we went down the list and they gave us the call and said, send somebody up, and it was us. I think one of the advantages that I had was the week before we had done a one-on-one with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan together. And when we sat down with them, we weren't easy on them. And one of the questions we asked Romney about was how, his campaign, along with the RNC, had worked to decredential and essentially disenfranchise all of these Republican delegates from the state of Maine. And so we were hard on Romney, and I think that they suspected, I don't know this, but I think they suspected we would probably not be as hard on the president because, as you know, Alex, I mean, that's the way media works in this country. You either support one side and then attack the other, or vice versa. So, they allowed us to come in and do the interview. They put no prerequisites on it, just told us you have 5 minutes, and when your 5 minutes is up, you're done. And so we went from there.
Incredible. We're going to play a clip of that right now. In fact, here it is from the intro of the news piece. Folks can go to fox19.com and watch the whole thing. And I should add, other Fox affiliates around the country who are on YouTube are lucky to get a few thousand views, even of big stories. Your stories are getting hundreds of thousands and millions of views, again, showing that the future is real reporting, real questions. There's no debate the NDAA is unconstitutional. The courts have already ruled it. There's no debate. It's super scary, right out of Nazi Germany. So media, though, just acts like, oh, we're going to be, non-biased. Well, I mean, a ham sandwich is a ham sandwich. A draconian piece of legislation is draconian. And that's the end of it. I mean, you have to report the facts. You've done that. And the media can take a cue from this. Here it is.
Mr. President, first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. When you signed the National Defense Authorization Act into law, you issued a signing statement at that time that said you would not use that power for indefinite detention on Americans. You understood the concerns that people had. A judge earlier this year issued that the administration couldn't use those powers because it's unconstitutional. So why are the government's own lawyers fighting that judge's order, the injunction in particular?
Well, look, the basic principle here is, number one, my first job is to keep the American people safe. Number two, we've got to do it in a way that respects our values and our traditions of rule of law. That's why I ban torture. That's why I've argued that we should actually close Guantanamo. But I've also said that, we've got some bad guys who are down there who we may not be able to try in a traditional court, but have pledged to try to hurt Americans. And so that's something that we inherited, that we're dealing with, and it's complicated. On the other hand, what I also said was a U.S. citizen can never be subject to that kind of detention. Congress disagreed with me, and I didn't want us to not be able to finance our military and pay our soldiers and our troops. So I signed the bill, but what I also said was, look, that I'm never going to use this power, and what I would suspect is that the courts are going to agree with us over the long term that that is not something that you can use when it comes to U.S. citizens.
Well, let me ask you then also about the so-called presidential kill list that's gotten a lot of attention, and this list of folks who have been targeted for assassination. Right. And on that list have been U.S. citizens who have not been afforded trial, including Anwar al-Awlaki.
All right, let's stop right there.
How do you, as president, or any president for that matter...
Yeah, we've got Anwar al-Awlaki who dined secretly at the Pentagon. We've got all that going on. And we've got the fact that Obama, it turns out, demanded that it be added to the bill, the indefinite detention of Americans. And he's got his Justice Department fighting to defend the legislation of the NDAA and his signing of it. And then he just sat there, Ben, and told you that, oh, he knew that the courts would overturn it. I mean, that makes Bill Clinton look like he's honest.
Well, look... This story, especially on the kill list, has gotten so much attention nationally, and to the point where it was picked up by The Atlantic and Huffington Post, and a lot of liberal, even the UK Guardian, liberal publications ran that interview. And it was really interesting to me to go through and to read the comment section, not so much what they were writing, but the comment section afterward. There were a couple of things that were very interesting there, because I think you alluded to a minute ago, we're not really breaking ground here in terms of those questions. I mean, those questions are not conspiratorial. They're not, these kind of off in the weeds questions. This is stuff that's pretty much out there, and it's pretty easy to find. Any reporter can find it. The discussion on the NDAA or the kill list or the situation with Awalaki. The problem is, I believe the problem really stems from the fact that media won't talk about these things because it does require some real effort to dig into it. I got a couple of interviews with reporters who asked me about it. Why would you ask those questions? And how could you even ask that? I mean, how would you even have the background on it? Well, because we've been covering it for a year. We've covered all of these issues. You mentioned about the Obama administration asking for it. We've covered extensively that statement by Carl Levin. All the Senate say.
I'll tell you what, stay there. Stay there. We're going to come right back after break and continue. Yeah, the Senator, Carl Levin, and others came out and said, hey, don't blame us for this. You asked for this, and then they released the letter. I mean, the whole time Obama says, I don't want it, and then he says, don't worry, I'll veto it, so opposition can't form. And then he gets it passed, and then he says, I won't sign it, but then he does. I mean, this is incredible deception. Stay there, Ben Swann. All right, we're back live. We've got Ben Swann. He reports for Fox 19 out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and every week makes national news because he covers hardcore issues and does his research. And I think you were alluding before we went to break there, Ben, that the media kind of comes to you and is like, how do you know this? How do you? It's almost like you're reading a book. That's weird. I've had other media ask me questions like, how do you know all this stuff? And I'm like, well, I'm into the news. I'm into the information. So elaborate on that. And then, yeah, I continue on the point you were getting into with Obama saying, well, I knew courts would overthrow it, when it turns out he was the one, his White House, demanding that the indefinite detention for citizens be in there.
You're right. Well, absolutely. And let me just comment on that second part first, because you'll notice in the interview that we did with him, you got 5 minutes, so there's not a whole lot of time. If you want to fight over one subject, you're not going to get much else in there. And so what we choose to do, because of the segment we do with Reality Check and the way it's built out, it really is perfect for going in, you ask the question, he gives the answer, but we don't leave it at that. And that's what so much national media does now. It's a he said, she said. I ask the question, you give the answer, and we're done. What we do is say, okay, I'll ask the question, you give the answer, and then we're going to go back and fact check your answer. And if you're wrong, we're going to say you were wrong. And if you're not being honest, we're going to say you're not being honest. So what we saw in that case is he never directly addresses the second part of my question, which was, why are your own lawyers fighting that injunction? Which, of course, as you just mentioned, that question's now dated because as of yesterday, they're now fighting the overall striking down of the indefinite detention clause, and they are appealing that ruling. So if the president is honest when he says, we always knew it would be struck down, we believed that it would go to the courts, we believe the courts would side with us, show me how that's siding with you if you're the one fighting it. Regardless, as you mentioned a minute ago with media, people keep asking, well, how do you know all this stuff? And really, there are two things. Number one is, as you mentioned, you just have to do a little bit of research, and there's so much of this stuff out there. And again, it's because of the internet. It's because of alternative media. And also, look, listen, I've got brilliant people who follow me on Facebook, on Twitter. I mean, the people who I call themselves followers or fans, that's the term that Facebook uses, right? I'm fans of theirs. I'm a huge fan of theirs because they're so smart and they have so much information and they just constantly are feeding back into me a lot of information and what's going on in the world. And did you know this? And did you know this? And I feel like they've been helping me to gain an education because there's so much stuff out there and they're just helping to draw it all in.
Well said, man. I tell you, it is so refreshing, Ben, to see somebody professionally get up there and I told Chris Hedges this last week because I'm not liberal or conservative. I'm just about truth and justice and freedom because I love my wife and my children and I want a future. It's refreshing to have somebody like Chris Hedges out there fighting the NDAA with his lawsuit and winning. And it's refreshing to see somebody like you, well-spoken, focused, handsome, getting the word out and reaching millions from one little TV station because it gives me hope that there are going to be other people out there that can do a better job than I can. That's what I told Chris Hedges. I mean, we all have our own tools in the fight for liberty. It's great. Now I'm wondering who else is going to step up? Who else is going to take action? Because all that evil needs to flourish is that good men and women do nothing. And so I salute what you're doing. And the point you make about what your listeners and viewers are saying, following the points they give you. It's incredible data. It's like the comments under the stories you were alluding to, the amazing points they're making. And you see everywhere, whether it's a right-wing site or a left-wing site with those bias, the comments more and more aren't left-wing or right-wing. They're like, hey, we see through this.
Right. Well, no, that's absolutely true. And what was exciting about, like, for instance, the Huffington Post is a good example. On the HuffPo article, if you read the comments, it was so interesting to hear people who are so used to this left-right paradigm that they couldn't even begin to fathom the idea. So their first complaint is, well, you're from a Fox station, so what you're asking the president about, this kill list can't possibly be true. Secondly, it's the same people in many cases who wanted Bush tried as a war criminal, who want Cheney tried as a war criminal, who give Obama a pass on his kill list. And so it was really interesting. That dynamic was they were really struggling through it. And then, of course, I posted it on my social networking pages so that people could see it there, go there and comment. And what was exciting to me was some of our people, and when I say our, I mean, liberty-minded people, start writing on there. And actually, we're winning some arguments, and I think even winning over some people's minds, saying, look, you have to break through and shatter through that paradigm that says it's left versus right, Republican versus Democrat, because it's not. It's liberty versus oppression. That's what the real issue is. And I think people are beginning to see that.
Wow, we're going to go to break. I have a long 18-minute segment coming up. I want to get into your favorite reports and what you're working on now, and then open the phones up for your fans all over the United States and worldwide that watch your reality check just as soon as it comes out. I know we do. And I remember seeing you about a year and a half ago. I'm like, man, this is something different. And then the reports just keep coming. And then in hindsight, they're so accurate. A breath of fresh air, folks. A breath of fresh air. We'll be right back. The toll-free number to join us, 800-259-9231. Stay with us.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
Well, he is an award-winning researcher, reporter, TV anchor. He anchors the news there on Fox 19, fox19.com in Cincinnati, Ohio, working at other stations in Texas. He's won the Edward R. Murrow Award and 2 Emmys on his mantle. And he's a patriot, very exciting. I want to get into some of his other stories here. Ben Swann, local Ohio reporter, grills Obama on kill list. Here's another one. Reality check. Is the embassy attack in Libya a clear example of blowback? Here's another one. Will the Libya attack shape American foreign policy moving forward? These are the important questions. He goes on, did RNC script the rule changes? Will that start a civil war in the Republican Party? He questioned the Aurora shooting and the anomalies and people saying other shooters and all the rest of it. I mean, this is what we need to talk about. These are the questions. I've got to ask you this, not to promote my show or anything. I'm just flattered by it. My producer was telling me when he asked, hey, have you ever heard of the Alex Jones Show, that you indeed have heard of the show and do listen sometimes. Now, I know as a journalist, I'm more of a journalist / commentator, rabble rouser. I wear a lot of hats around here. But I'm just curious, how did you stumble across my broadcast, and how did it affect the different perspectives that you're bringing to your own show?
Well, I would say that I knew of you because I'm from Texas, and obviously you're down in Texas. So now I'm from further west than you are, but I was aware of you and had heard your name. And then most of it really was very conspiratorial, and the guy's a nut job, and so I didn't really know much about you. And then once I've gotten more into what we've been covering the last few months, I had a lot of people who have said, Alex Jones has covered a lot of these things. And obviously there are people who are wary because, as you said, you're more of a commentator. So in your case, certainly it's more of a there's more opinion infused into it, more perspective infused into it, which is fine. I mean, clearly you're doing what you do. So I think I do think there's something very important about alternative media. And one of the things that I think is impressive, regardless of how people feel about you one way or the other, because obviously you have many, many fans out there and you got people who don't feel as strongly about you or dislike you. And that's not necessarily a bad place to be. Look, I always tell people I would rather people love me or hate me, but don't feel nothing about me. Because as soon as you're the guy that people feel nothing about, then you're not accomplishing anything. At least challenge the narrative and challenge what people are thinking and challenge their minds. And so I think you do a great job of that, and I take my hat off to you for that.
Well, I just wanted to get your perspective because I again, admire your courage in what you're doing. I mean, obviously, you're a talented guy, and I hope that it doesn't, count against you with the power structure that you're telling the truth. Have you gotten any big national offers yet in the last year and a half that you've been knocking it out of the park?
No. In fact, very, very little talk from anyone higher up, which is fine with me. One of the things that I don't ever want to do is I never want to look beyond where I'm at right now. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, I'm incredibly blessed to be doing what I'm doing and to have the platform that I have. And I will say that in the last year and a half, my view of what, national media has completely changed. And certainly my view of what it means to be a national voice, because we're sitting here in little old Cincinnati, Ohio, and yet we have a global voice right now, and people in 30 different countries are watching what we do. And it's this little 5-minute segment, and we do it 3 times a week.
Yeah, if I was Glenn Beck launching his new TV network back on television, I would hire somebody like you. And I think that'd probably be a perfect fit. I mean, Glenn Beck actually is in competition with me. He thinks I'm not in competition with him. I want to defeat the globalists. There's no future. But the reason I brought up myself was I wanted to get into your view of the world, because I know as a journalist, you don't want to put any of those views out, because then they could say, oh, well, that's his bias. But come on. I mean, tyranny is tyranny. I mean, it wouldn't be, oh, you have a bias in 1860 because you were against slavery, and, oh, that's your opinion. Obviously, it's the right position to be against slavery. I mean, some of these things are so clear. What is your view of QE3? What is your view of the TSA? All of this stuff. I mean, is it that the world's getting crazier that's brought you closer to, say, my views?
Well, here's what I think. You asked about QE3, and we're actually doing a piece on it next week to explain to people exactly how it works and what the design is behind it. My issue is less about, like, for instance, obviously I have very strong opinions, but I think most people do. My issue is more about making sure that I'm not going to necessarily try to sway someone else's opinion. I just want their opinion to be based on fact, not on fairy tale. And I think what we see too often in modern media is that we're allowing people to buy into fairy tales. We don't challenge them. Jon Stewart does a hilarious bit making fun of the way that CNN does their whole, we'll leave it there. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they have this phrase, we'll leave it there. And he made fun of that one time. And the fact that they say, we'll leave it there on major issues that shouldn't be left there, because you're not allowing people to go through this process of critical thinking and to say, well, what does this actually mean for my life? So when Ben Bernanke announces, yeah, we're going to go ahead and move on with QE3 and it'll help the economy, I would be willing to bet you that only 1/10 of the population, if even that, has any clue as to what he's talking about, has any clue at all. Maybe even 1% of the population really understands what. No,
I agree with you, because I've talked to so many bankers, business people, even folks that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Who are in finance, they don't understand what this means.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's so many different components to it. You mentioned that we've been talking a lot about the issue in Libya and what's going on over there right now. And one of the reasons we're able to do that is because if you go all the way back to when we first started doing these, one of the very first reality check segments we ever put together was about the fact that the U.S. was getting involved in Libya, and it didn't make sense as to why we were doing it. The fact that we were involving ourselves without a declaration of war. And now we're starting to see kind of the ramifications of that foreign policy and what's it really about. One of the things we're going to move into in the next few weeks, and I think people will be pretty interested in it, is we're going to start taking a look at the situation with the petrodollar and what China's doing right now in terms of these refineries they're attempting to build in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt, and ultimately what it's going to mean if the petrodollar disappears and there's a new currency in which oil is bought and traded. If that happens, it means a change in the way of life for every American that people don't even see coming because nobody's talking about it in national media, alternative media. You guys are talking about it.
Thank you, Mr. Edward R. Murrow. Absolutely on target. Right there. That is so exciting to hear someone in mainstream news understand that. And the power structure knows this, but it's at a very high technocratic level. They're engineering this while moving their assets to China and other areas ahead of this seismic shift to bring in this global governance, this world government run by the private banks. How do I know that? They wrote about it 30 years ago. They wrote about it 10 years ago. They now brag about it here and there. So more and more, the mainstream media realizes they're passe. Have you seen the CNBC clip where they admit, hey, we're all slaves to global government run by bankers?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Guys, can we cue that up, please, the CNBC clip? Because in more and more publications, they are admitting it, but it's more in establishment publications or in trade publications. They're admitting where we're going. But this isn't just quantitative easing. It's also been, and I want your take on this, going directly to the mega banks themselves as a kind of bailout. I mean, the $40 billion a month, half of the $80 billion goes to buy these derivatives, these mortgage derivatives. I mean, that isn't the taxpayer's job to pay for that.
No, absolutely not. And they're doing exactly what you said. What they're essentially doing is saying, look, we're going to go in and we're going to buy all these mortgage-backed securities and derivatives. And in doing so, they are creating a system where they're socializing the profit, or excuse me, they're privatizing the profit, in that the banks are the ones who will profit from it. But then they're socializing the risk of it. They're buying up all these risky things with our dollars, then turning around and saying, well, here are the profits for that. We don't share in the profits of it. The other issue is that this is indefinite, and people may not realize this, but when you move into quantitative easing that has no end to it, it's simply indefinite, and you're going to buy all this up. If you have a 401k, if you have a mutual fund that you're invested into for your retirement, all of those very safe ones that traditionally have done well, those are all going to be bought up by the Fed. So the Fed's going to have control of that. The government will control all of those safe bets, which means if you have money you need to put aside for your own retirement, they're actually going to force you to put it into riskier stocks. There are no safe bets because they're going to buy up all the ones that are safe. So it really hurts everyone in this process. It doesn't just help the banks, but it actually puts the average investor in a position where everything they're invested into for their future that traditionally has been very safe is now going to be very risky.
They infect the whole system, then hold you hostage and say, we're too big to fail, and then basically transfer all the wealth to themselves while destroying your wealth. Then they're the last group standing, and they're able to buy everything up for pennies on the dollar. That is the economic model of conquest that we're now facing as a society. And as you just stated, when they announce unlimited QE3, that leads one place. It leads to Weimar Republic, Germany type inflation. It leads to Zimbabwe-style inflation. That is the road that they've now put us on. And like you said, it's just a minor footnote. Oh, QE3, no connection to gold exploding and other commodities like gasoline, oil spiking. And this is just with the announcement. And here are the insiders now, not doing QE1, QE2, QE3, unlimited, open-ended QE3. Now they get to know, the insiders, when they're going to be doing it with these little adjustments. The insider trading ramifications are stratospheric.
Well, what's interesting, too, is even the terms that are used, QE1, QE2, QE3, it sounds like it is the third time that the Fed has gone through this process in order to, as most people would call it, stimulate the economy. The problem is QE1, QE2, and QE3 are not the same thing at all. They were completely different programs that were designed in order to affect the markets and affect the system. So it's not, QE3 is not round three, and that's what most people think that it is. It's an entirely different setup. Again, as you mentioned, buying up all of these mortgage-backed derivatives. And as a result of that, I think most people have no idea. They think QE3, more stimulus, that means the government's going to put more money into the system. Well, that's good for everyone. And again, as you mentioned too, most financial channels and most financial reporters aren't even talking about it in any term that people can understand. But what you described right now about shifting all of this burden away from the banks themselves, putting the risk onto the taxpayer, buying up the safe bets, shifting their own money. This is all stuff that, when you say it, a lot of people would say, oh, it's Alex Jones, it's all conspiratorial. It's not a conspiracy at all in terms of being hidden. It's a conspiracy that's happening right out in the open, and anyone can find this information. They're just not bothering to do so. They're too busy worried about the fact that Jersey Shore's off at the end of the season.
Well, exactly. And a lot of times I get up here and rant and rave because I'm genuinely upset. That tends to get people out of their trance to realize something's going on. And I kind of make it safe to talk about these things, and then others can start to cover it. So I think everybody, the Lord works in mysterious ways. That's why I'm excited to see you and others out there, exposing this in a really focused news style, because that will reach people out there who've kind of heard about this but think it's a conspiracy theory. And there you are with a whole news team behind you, able to lay all this out, and people can go again, to fox19.com to find all your reports. They're also on YouTube. Before we go to some phone calls here and talk about some of the other reports you're working on right now, Ben Swann, award-winning reporter joining us right now. I wanted to ask you the question about your social media and some of your own private websites or things outside of the Fox side if folks want to follow some of the things you're talking about off air.
Yeah, they can go over to Facebook. We have a pretty strong Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Ben Swann Reality Check. That's the easiest way to find it. And Swann has two N's. So if you're not familiar with me, then you've got to put in BENSWANN Reality Check. And then you can follow us on Twitter as well, and it's at Fox19 Ben Swann. So we're doing work on both of those sites. We don't really have much going on with Google Plus yet, but we're working on creating some circles there, create more discussion again. Because as I mentioned, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the people who follow me, and I just feel like those are the folks. So many of them are so smart and savvy, and they know what's going on. They're awake is the term I would use for them. And when you get around people who are awake, it energizes you and it keeps you going.
That's what's happened. Well, I've seen your sites. It's basically it's liberty lovers. It's my listeners. It's your listeners. It's people that understand what's happening and who are breaking down the left-right paradigm and saying, hey, it's about liberty. Now, the Democrats just so happen to be, absolute tyrants. The Republicans, same ball of wax. I tend to agree with the Republicans more because on the surface they say they're pro-gun. And things like that. But again, at the very top, you see with somebody like Obama and Romney, past the rhetoric, there's almost no difference. What's your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to strain to find a real substantive difference between President Obama and Mitt Romney. And that's one reason why the two of them, I think, are going to really struggle when you get into this debate. The conventions were fascinating for folks who were kind of political watchers. The conventions were really interesting because the Republicans did such a poor job of shaping their message. Their message really wasn't about what they're going to change in the future. It was about how Obama had failed and he hadn't done enough, and they really pushed for this "we built it" kind of idea. Because they were using a play on words. But there really wasn't a vision for what they would do differently. The Democratic convention, the same way. There was no real vision for the future. It was, well, if we go with that guy, we're not going to like it. And so there was very little vision casting in either convention, which was kind of fascinating to me. And part of the reason I think for that is because if you really break down the direction that Governor Romney wants to take the country and the direction President Obama does, there are some differences in terms of how they want to deal with taxation, how they want to deal certainly with people who are in higher income brackets and taxation. But if we're talking about, for instance, foreign policy, tell me one thing Governor Romney will do differently than what President Obama
did. Or TSA or NSA or the police state or any of these things that really matter. It's like MapQuest plotting two different ways to go to the same destination. I mean, there's some changes in the route, but it goes the same place.
Absolutely, because ultimately their view, and even when we talk about, you asked me about some of my own personal views. Look, I'm a journalist. I'm a constitutionalist. My personal view is that the Constitution, rule of law, is what our founders and framers designed. They knew that we should not be a democracy. People say all the time we're a democracy. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. We're not a democracy.
We're a republic.
We're a republic, absolutely. And the difference is vast. The republic is rule of law. Democracy is rule of mob. And so all you need is a +1 in a democracy in order to push through any crazy laws or rules.
And rob the other 49%. It's two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. But again, that's terrorist talk according to the Homeland Security. Have you done a report yet on MIAC and Homeland Security reports saying veterans and gun owners are the terrorists?
You know what? Some people have been sending me some of that information, and we are looking at doing something on that.
All right, we're going to break.
Like constitutionalists. If you believe in the Constitution, you're a terrorist.
Exactly. We're going to break. As usual, I've hogged the guests. We got loaded phone lines for you, but let me just add this here. DrudgeReport.com. It's also at Infowars.com. Our story about the nuclear reactor also evacuated at the J.J. Pickle Center here in Austin, Texas. It's top red linked at the #1 website in the world, DrudgeReport.com. You can go there, and I'm glad that our servers are still staying up, because that'll probably send us about 3 million readers. Or is the site still up, Infowars.com? Top linked there, and they're now evacuating multiple campuses, not just the University of Texas, but up in North Dakota as well, over the, someone's basically saying they're Al-Qaeda, saying all these bombs are about to go off. We've got reporters still downtown. Well, now they've gone up to the reactor, so they'll be popping in during the during the next hour a little bit when we cover QE3 or unlimited QE, what that means, and so much more. But straight ahead, final segment. Maybe I'll twist his arm for 5 more minutes into the next hour, so we can take 6 or 7 calls with Ben Swann from Fox19.com.
I think that right now the question is, do we all work for central bankers? That's what I want to address to our guest tonight. Is this global governance at last? Is it one world, the central bankers in charge? Jim Iorio, you say we've got some downside here, a correction in the markets. Fine. But aren't we all just living and dying for what the central banks do? Aren't we all just counting on the fact that there's a Bernanke put and that we won't go any lower than, say, 5% down from here?
Of course we are, because if we look at the economic data, there's nothing to get excited about in that.
And they go on for 5 minutes to all agree we're run by global government, run by banks. Exactly what I said 17 years ago was going to happen, because I was reading the Trilateral Commission public documents. But the issue here is Bernanke said a year ago there'd be no QE3. Well, now it's just unlimited QE. And they wanted us to beg for it first, because if they don't do it, we're in trouble. But if they do, we're in trouble because they engineered this. Ben Swann, he's one of the anchors over there, an investigative reporter at Fox 19 in Cincinnati, now has a national, international following via YouTube and their site. We're taking phone calls, got a lot of fans out there. We're going to take 5 phone calls for you for this short segment, and the next, then you're gone. Let's talk to Brian in Colorado. You're on the air with our guest. Go ahead.
Big fan of yours, Mr. Swann, and you as well, Mr. Jones. I wanted to bring you up to pace on a few things that I found out. I live in Colorado, and it's very frightening to have the ATF state that they're going to take people's gun rights that smoke marijuana or use marijuana, because a lot of people in Colorado have guns, and a lot of people in Colorado smoke marijuana. But the thing I really wanted to point out to you, gentlemen, is that through my research, I found that marijuana oil cures cancer.
Well, it's certainly been shown to be a treatment. Let me stop you. This is how crazy the news is. That broke after I was off air yesterday. We carried it on the nightly news. I read the ruling from 2 days ago. It's true. They're saying alcohol abuse, marijuana use, any drug, any substance abuse that they say, no judge, no jury, they're taking your guns. Ben Swann, what do you make of that?
I haven't heard it. So I really can't comment on it. I mean, I'd love to see it, though. One of your producers could be a link to that. That'd be great.
It's already in featured news archive. Just put it up on screen for folks that are watching and listening. Can find it at Infowars.com. I'll have it reposted to the front page. Let's go. Thank you, Brian. Let's go to Luke in South Korea. You're on the air with Mr. Swann. Go ahead.
Oh, hi there. How are you? I've seen from my own experience with mainstream media that certain stories the government want to have suppressed never make it to air. And in England, they have the DA system, Defence Advisory. They've still got the legacy of that in Australia, and they're trying to reenact it as a voluntary system.
Yeah, it's a D notice, absolutely. And they're trying to get that here. What's your question for Mr. Swann?
Well, right, with the absence of a D notice, how does the government get the issues they want suppressed in your opinion?
Have talking points.
We know it's happening.
Well, I mean, I know because I've talked to national. They have talked. Well, you saw 2 weeks ago where the New York Times is in contact with the CIA and killing stories for them. Ben, your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think there are definitely talking points that go out. And I think within local media, the issue isn't so much talking points as it is groupthink. If you know, the sister parent station or if the networks aren't talking about it, then it must not be news. And so it's groupthink on the lower level, bigger level, it's talking points.
Exactly. At the top of the pyramid, talking points are given, White House meetings, you name it, book deals, all of it, because I've been offered it. And then all the little parrots think, oh, those are the stars. If I copy what they say, I'll rise up. When in truth, even if you were a cynical mercenary, being different is what will make you rise up in a stagnant system.
Right on.
All right. I hope that answers your question from South Korea. We're going to race back, and we're going to go to Angel, and then we're going to go to Eric. At least those, maybe some more, for Ben Swann, Fox 19 reporter. But like he said, now from that city, he's worldwide. That's why the dinosaur media is in so much trouble. That's why the info war is exploding.
You are listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Final segment with Edward R. Murrow, an Emmy award-winning researcher and journalist. He's the anchor there at Fox 19 in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he joins us for a final segment, Ben Swann. And we're going to take a few final calls for him in this short segment. Then the economic news, pot smokers have their guns confiscated. If this federal court ruling is implemented, the Justice Department says asset forfeiture. You know, in East Texas, some of the towns will pull an old lady over and rob her purse. Well, they catch you with marijuana, baby. They're taking everything you got. I'm talking one joint. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm glad that the caller reminded me. Angel in California, you're on the air with Ben Swann. Welcome.
Hello?
Yes, Angel.
Hi. Hey, I have a question for the guest and maybe for you, Alex. I've been microchipped, and I don't know what it's in the back of my head. And I'm not sure.
That's a good prank call. We don't screen your calls. Very, very funny. I can tell you're not schizophrenic. I can hear you laughing. You think it's funny. But we got chips for people like you. Don't worry. Let's talk to Eric in Ohio, up in your neck of the woods, Ben. Eric, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome, sir.
Yes, my question, well, first a quick comment is I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a master's in business, and I used to be a certified nuclear medicine technologist, and I'm a veteran, and I live here in Springfield, Ohio, and I'm having a hard time finding a job. And I was wondering, Ben, based upon your research, is more of our bad economy based upon what Obama's done or based upon what John Kasich has done? Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. You know, just real quick on Ohio, it's tough to say. I mean, certainly the president says because of the auto bailout, they created a lot of jobs. 8 out of every 10 jobs in Ohio is connected somehow to the auto industry, so he definitely gets some credit for that. But then that big jobs board that the Governor Kasich put together obviously is helping as well. So it's probably a combination of the two. But even so, I mean, unemployment's still high. It's still at like 7.6%, but it's still lower than the national average. So for guys like you, I mean, it's not.
Look, here's the deal, sir. People that have advanced degrees in technology, you'd have to move to China. To get a job, you've got to move where they're having a growing economy. We've been deindustrialized by policy and undercut by Indian and Chinese workers. And nothing against them. That's just part of the engineering. That's why it's so hard for you to get a job, okay?
Oh, well, thank you very much, sir, and I just want some more clarity.
Thank you, sir. God bless you. I think it was a good point that Ben made. Real fast, JR in Utah. Quick question. Only got a minute and a half left.
Yes, thanks for having me. First-time listener to your show. Ben Swann, I've been following you for a little bit now, and I have a question for you. Do you have any concerns about, the message and the facts that you're delivering, to everybody? I mean, pretty much everywhere, how you're bringing the truth out. Do you have any concerns about them shutting down your show and trying to silence you in any way?
No, not really. I mean, right now, again, the support from people has been tremendous. As long as there's support, that's great. And, we'll keep speaking the truth as long as they allow us to. But again, as long as the internet stays free, there's always a place to speak out. And that's the key to it, is you got to keep the internet free, because as long as it is, it challenges that national narrative. Alternative media is what's...
there you go. And that's why they want cybersecurity. That's why old media is supporting web censorship, because they can't deal with the competition. Ben is a talented, smart guy. He could go anywhere, do a talk radio show, you name it, and be successful. I could, because people want to hear the information. Absolutely hit the nail on the head. Well, I tell you, Ben, hearing you here freeform, not just on the news, I'm even more impressed. And we'll continue to follow everything you're doing over at Infowars.com and over at PrisonPlanet.tv. And I look forward to, from time to time, if you ever want to push something out national that you're not already pushing on your own show, or you want to supercharge something, give us a call, because I'd like to have you on every few months.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. Have a great weekend coming up. Be safe. All right, there goes Ben Swann. Wow, that guy's going places. If we have any freedom left. If the web stays open and free, that guy's going places. He's already gone somewhere, standing up for liberty. Very exciting. Love to see up-and-comers like that. We'll be right back. Stay with us.